what if we can take complicated functions and rebuild them using simple building blocks? To grasp this idea, let's begin with something you probably take for granted, a calculator. You can simply type into your calculator sine of 0.001 and it outputs this number here. But this wasn't always a trivial task. You see, for centuries, astronomers, navigators, and engineers needed values of sine and cosine to make calculations about angles, distances, and motion. Long before electronic computers, these values had to be calculated by hand, often using large books of trigonometric tables. So, mathematicians naturally began searching for ways to compute these values more efficiently. And one of the first clues comes from a very surprising simple observation. For very small angles measured in radians, sine of theta approximately equals theta, and this is known as the small angle approximation. In other words, near zero, the sine function behaves almost exactly like the line y equals x. So if you wanted to estimate sine of 0.001, you would simply say, well, sine of 0.001 equals 0.001 approximately, which, as it turns out, is already pretty close, as sine of 0.001 equals 0.00099, and so on. We can actually see this for ourselves when plotting the graph for both of these functions. First, we plot y1 equals sine x, and secondly, y2 equals x. Of course, we can clearly see here that the approximation is actually really accurate around the point 0, 0. Now, this is great, but let's pause for a moment and think about why this works in the first place. Why should the sine function behave like the line y equals x near 0? Well, when two curves touch at a point and share the same slope there, they become almost indistinguishable if you zoom in close enough. That slope is called the tangent line at a specific given point. And that's exactly what the line y equals x is. It's the tangent line to sine x at the point 0, 0. To see why, let's look at the derivative of sine x. The derivative tells us the slope of the function at a given point. For sine, we know that if we differentiate this once, we get the function cosine of x. So the slope of the sine curve at x equals 0 is cosine of 0, which equals 1. And that means the tangent line at the point x equals 0, y equals 0 has slope 1. A line with slope 1 passing through the origin has the equation y equals x. And that's why it works so well here. So what we're really doing when we say sine of x approximately equals x, this idea itself is called linearization in mathematics. Basically, we're replacing a very complicated function with a straight line that best matches it at a particular point. And while this might seem like a small mathematical trick, it actually turns out to be incredibly powerful. You see, linearization is used in a variety of different applications in mathematics. It's actually used in computing the Navier-Stokes equations for certain applications as well, but I'll save that for another video. As we've seen, a straight line is quite a simple possible approximation for a function, so this naturally raises a question. If using a line gives us a very good approximation near a specific point, could we do even better by using something slightly more flexible than a line? Perhaps a polynomial that bends in the same way as the function? Well, exploring that idea leads us directly to one of the most beautiful tools in calculus, the Taylor series. As a quick reminder, a polynomial is just a combination of powers of x, all added together, as you can see here. These are some of the most simple building blocks we have in mathematics. They're easy to evaluate, easy to differentiate, easy to integrate, and crucially, they're flexible. By choosing the different coefficients, a subscript 0, a subscript 1, a subscript 2, etc., you can make a polynomial take on all sorts of different shapes. So here's the plan. Instead of approximating a function with a line, we'll approximate it with a polynomial that matches the function near a chosen point. Let's keep focusing on the point x equals 0, since that's where we first started. Okay, so first we want to make sure the polynomial that we are building has the same value as the function at that point. We know that sine of 0 equals 0, and we know that our polynomial must also equal 0 at this point. We can therefore force the polynomial to pass through the origin by removing the constant term. We've simply evaluated a subscript 0 equals 0 here. This means that the function we are trying to approximate and the function that we're trying to build both meet at the exact same point. This is, of course, a great starting place, but next we want to match the slope, because this tells us the direction the function is heading as it leaves that point. So the slope of sine x is given by its derivative, which we know is cosine of x, and at x equals 0, cosine of 0 equals 1. So the sine curve leaves the origin with slope 1. And if we want our polynomial to mimic this behaviour, its slope at 0 must also be 1. So if we compute the derivative of our polynomial, we would get a1 plus 2a2x plus 3a3x squared, and so on. And at x equals 0, this becomes simply a1, because we are forcing it to equal 1. So we simply set a1 equals 1, and our polynomial becomes the following. At this stage, our polynomial and the sine curve share the same value and the same slope at the origin. And if you recall from the beginning of this video, this is what we had initially. But how do we extend it from here? Well, we look at the second derivative, because this tells us the rate at which the slope changes. So for sine, if we compute its second derivative, we get minus sine of x. And at 0, this equals 0. So this tells us that right at the origin, the sine curve isn't really curving upwards or downwards just yet. And following like we did previously, we force our polynomial that we're building to have the same second derivative at x equals 0. So if we compute the second derivative of our polynomial, we get this expression here, and at x equals 0, this simply becomes 2a2. If we match the second derivative here, we get 2a2 equals 0, and so the a2 coefficient equals 0, which is quite interesting. The quadratic term here simply disappears. Let's continue like we have been doing by computing the next derivative. So for sine of x, its third derivative is minus cosine of x, and at x equals 0, this simply equals minus 1. For our polynomial, the third derivative at 0 is 6a3, and if we match these, we get the coefficient a3 equals minus 1 over 6. And so our entire polynomial is turned into this expression here. Now we can approximate this and forget about the additional terms, but if we wanted to, we could also compute these as well. And so this leaves us with sine x is approximately equal to x minus x cubed divided by 6. And if we take a look at the function as we calculated the different coefficients, we can see how well it's approximating to our original function. Now, did you notice anything special about what we just did? Well, we started with a function, sine of x, and some point that we wanted to approximate the function around, which was x equals 0. And then we simply computed its derivatives at that point. Then we looked at our general expression for our polynomial and matched these conditions. So if our polynomial contains a term like a2x squared, then simply taking the second derivative of this gives us 2 times 1 times a2, which equals 2 factorial a2. More generally, if the polynomial contains a term a subscript n, x to the power n, then differentiating n times produces n factorial a subscript n. So when we evaluate the nth derivative at the point we're expanding around, we get this expression here. And if we solve for the coefficient, it gives us this expression here as well. And this tells us exactly what each coefficient in our polynomial must be. So this means that we can write our approximation of our polynomial like so. Now, of course, this is the general expression for when x equals 0. And when we approximate a function around x equals 0, this is actually known as the Maclaurin series of our function. But what if we wanted to approximate it around some point A, for example? Well, the idea is essentially the same. We still want to build a polynomial that matches the function's value, slope, curvature, and higher order behaviour at that specific point. The only difference is that instead of measuring a distance from 0, we measure the distance from the point A. So rather than using powers of just x, we use powers of x minus a. But why do we do this? Well, because when x equals a, the quantity x minus a becomes 0. And this makes the polynomial behave very cleanly at that point that we're expanding around, just like x did when we were expanding around 0. Now, if we adopt this, then the approximation around x equals a looks like this. So the only real difference between expanding around 0 and expanding around a is that we simply replace the powers of x with powers of how far we are away from a. And in doing so, we build a polynomial that mirrors the function's behaviour right around that point. When you look at this expression, it helps to think about what each of the terms are actually doing here. The constant term ensures that the value of the polynomial matches the value of the function at the point we're expanding around. The next term ensures that the slope of the polynomial matches the slope of the function at that same point. The term after makes sure the rate at which the slope changes also matches, and each additional term continues this idea, matching deeper layers of how the function behaves at that point. But now comes the really fascinating question. What happens if we don't stop? What if instead of taking just a few terms, we keep adding terms forever? Do we eventually recover the function exactly? Well, sometimes, yeah. In fact, for many functions, adding infinitely many terms gives you not just an approximation, but the function itself. Take e to the power of x, for example, or sine of x. These aren't just good approximations near 0, with infinitely many terms that actually equal to the original function itself. And I think that's what makes the Taylor series feel so magical to me. A complicated function can be written as an infinite polynomial, but the caveat is this doesn't always happen. And to understand why, we need to talk about something called the radius of convergence. Now, before we talk about the radius of convergence, it's worth highlighting that an approximation with finitely many terms is called a Taylor polynomial, but with infinitely many terms, this is called a Taylor series. Now, when you write down a Taylor series around some point x equals a, you are essentially building an infinite sum. But infinite sums are very delicate things. For some values of x, this approximation works beautifully, like we saw with e to the power of x, for example. For others, the terms may grow too large or fail to settle down at all. And the radius of convergence tells us the size of the interval around the point a where this infinite sum actually converges. In other words, it tells us how far you can move away from the centre before the Taylor series stops behaving properly. So if a Taylor series is centred at x equals a and the radius of convergence r, then the series converges for values of x satisfying this expression here. This means the series works inside a kind of bubble around the point a. Inside that bubble, the infinite polynomial behaves really well, and outside of it, the series may diverge completely. We see this diverging behaviour for the function the natural log of x. I always like to ask why in mathematics. So why is this useful? Well, the key reason is that polynomials are much easier to work with than most functions. They're simple to evaluate, differentiate and integrate, and computers can compute them very efficiently. So by replacing a complicated function with a Taylor polynomial or even a Taylor series, we turn a difficult problem into a much simpler one. And I personally think this is something that stretches way beyond just functions, but about mathematics as a subject too. You see, if you find a problem way too complex, the best approach is usually to break it down into manageable steps, just like we did in this video. Even the most complex ideas often come from building simple pieces together, one step at a time. And that is why I love mathematics so much. And if you do too, make sure to subscribe or click join to support the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching.